Let's talk about transport first. You recall that there was a directive that we should reduce some transport fares. Now, some commercial drivers in Ghana are refusing to reduce transport fares despite a recent drop in fuel prices and GPRTU directive. Let's get more from Public Relations Officer of the Ghana Private Road Transport Union, GPRTU, Abbas Imoro. Abbas, thank you for joining me this morning. And so, following the directive, some of your drivers are not heeding to the directive. Have you heard about this? Has this come to your attention?
Yes, please. We've heard about some of the floating drivers trying to do things on their own. And in fact, that would be unfortunate, because if these floating drivers who are not supposed to be on the road are behaving this way, it's like somebody using counterfeit to buy unauthorized drug, like buying weed with counterfeit. It's just unfortunate, because a floating driver is not supported by the law of the land. If you look at our LI 2180 regulation 121, meaning before you operate as a transport operator, you hit the road, you should be with one of the registered transport unions, or you yourself must be able to register your transport company before you be able to work as a transport operator. Here they are. None of them belongs to any union, any society. They haven't formed any transport company. And these are the very people plotting this very law.
So you'd say that all of the GPRTU members are adhering to the directive. They have reduced their transport fares. We're only having challenges with the floating drivers. In cases like this, how do you deal with the floating drivers?
Well, maybe the liberty they are enjoying, maybe they don't want that. Because as I said earlier on, I don't think our leadership will also sit unconcerned for those law-abiding drivers to reduce their fuel fares just for the recalcitrant ones to enjoy any illegality. I don't think that will be allowed. Today we will all resume work. We have our leadership. We will see how best maybe we would need assistance for the law of the land to work.
Okay.
Because anytime we increase oil fares and end up at the transport ministry with a communique, if it becomes a law for all transport operators, then immediately our people enjoy that. Why this reduction with some minor problems?
Okay.
This is also a law. The same law back us to increase, and it's the same law which back us to decrease.
Okay. Please stay with me. I'd want to go on the phone and speak to Executive Director of Chamber of Petroleum Consumers Ghana, Duncan Awa. Thanks for joining us this morning. And so you've heard the challenge that it looks as though those who are not adhering to the directive are the floating drivers. But I want to understand, the floating drivers, do they constitute a large margin for people who use the public transports to feel the impact of they not reducing the fares?
Well, these floating drivers, of course, would amount to some significant numbers as far as the public transport space is concerned. Fortunately, the floating drivers are not outside the law. They don't operate in space. So it is easier for the commuting public to ensure that as we stand or as we speak, they are able to get probably the MCTD, the numerous police officers across the stretch or our road to ensure that if these drivers, after every careful consultation to reduce transport fares, are still charging above what the commuter should pay, I think that it's at this point you involve the MCCD to ensure that the fleecing of the consumer or the commuter is stopped forthwith.
Do we have measurable laws that can compel drivers to really reduce the fares?
We do have laws in the country, and of course, like I did say, extortion in itself is not something that the laws of the land would permit. And so once it is agreed within that we all should charge a certain fee or fare, and people have decided to flout that directive, MFA, it stands to reason that it is easier to apply the law of extortion or fleecing of innocent commuters. I would encourage the police MTTD and all others concerned to ensure that they don't arrest these recalcitrant drivers in order that we can be able to get them to comply. They also take them to court accordingly and see what sanctions in law can be applied to them. I don't think that it is fair for any driver to still insist at this point that commuters should pay so high for transportation costs. It could have even been 20% if you look at the rate of appreciation of the currency and how things seem to be declining generally across the country. I think that we could have done better.
I mean, you've been very vocal prior to the directive that they should reduce their fares. You're very, COPEC has been very, very vocal in saying that because of the way the price of fuel is looking, we should expect that by now they would have reduced their fares. The percentage so far for the reduction, do you think is fair?
Like I did indicate, the 15 sounded fair a week or two ago, but as it stands at this point, I'm sure the Ghanaian commuter would have wished that it was 20 or 25 because, like I indicated, fuel has declined by numbers. I mean, you have a situation where we're dealing with 16, 15. Today, you are dealing with 12, the 12 region. So it stands to reason that we could simply have done better or we could have done more. But the 15 is significant, except that what I picked over the weekend is that a lot of the drivers are currently doing about 8 to 10%. I am yet to get confirmation of the 15 being done across board. So the GPRTU across their terminals would also have to check whether 15 is indeed 15 or 15 now is looking like 10. And then we've communicated something and we are doing something differently altogether. I think that also needs to be looked at, though I concede that fares could go down further if the GPRTU would be further magnanimous to all of us.
Don't worry, I shall find out from Abbas before I end the conversation. But finally, before I let you go, so long as the city performs the way it's performing, we should continue enjoying the transport fares being reduced, or there are some other factors that you think can come up that may have to affect the prices?
Our skepticism initially was to the extent that the city's good run of form wasn't going to be sustained. But from what we have been briefed on so far, it looks as though this run would likely sustain itself. And for that, it is likely fuel prices would even decline further. I got much comforted when I heard the Abosokan spare parts dealers equally tell their members to ensure they reduce the cost of spare parts. So if you have cost of lubricant, cost of fuel, cost of parts coming down, 70% of the transportation mix would have declined, except for probably insurance and, other charges that we slap on them, these drivers. I would think that, yes, transport fares could come down further in the days ahead. 15 is good for now, but if we see fuel decline to, say, 10, 11, or 10, I'm sure that GPRTU may be further magnanimous to all of us. But for now, we are looking at enforcement of the 15 agreed and communicated, and as to whether we should allow these floating drivers and, for that matter, other members of the driving public to still continue fleeting the public. I think that is illegal at this point.
Right.
Bearing in mind that the Armada Union, together with the Transport Ministry, together with other stakeholders, all indeed agree that the fares must come down. I think that we need to enforce this immediately.
Thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. But back to you, Mr. Imoro. And so would you confirm whether your members are adhering to 15% or there's another figure they're working with?
15% is the official stage in which we are as at from Saturday. So they are complying. If you go to the stations, as I saw, I think from GBC or so, they went out and the passengers were saying, yes, it has been reduced. And some said, it was one who said the vehicle she used, the driver didn't reduce. And yeah, I understand those are the recalcitrant few floating drivers around. But I strongly believe, like Duncan said, it's a law, and the law enforcing agency must be used to make sure the law works.
I mean, you're part of the leadership of GPRTU. Where would you start from? Today is the working day after the Saturday when the new fares were to take effect. Where are you starting from, at least to deal with these recalcitrant drivers? Where will you start from?
Oh, like we said, the passengers who are being cheated should not accept the cheating system. And no driver will also like to be roaming about with the vehicle, burning fuel with us working. They will come back on the track when we stand fair. When we stand fair, they will come back on the track.
But Mr. Imoro, so that it doesn't sound like I'm stretching this a bit, we've been in this country where you see it can get a bit murky and very, very difficult when there is disagreement between passengers and drivers. Sometimes amounts to people getting hurt, and sometimes we even record death over as little as 2 cedi. And you can imagine how this can be. Is this enough encouraging commuters not to pay the amount and also asking drivers to do what is right? I'm thinking that as leadership, GPRTU particularly, what tool are you going to use, especially if you realize that the numbers are a little high today, beyond the call for commuters not to pay high amounts? We
said the commuters should hand over the driver to the various police they come across. Okay. They shouldn't beat the driver because he is alone with the maid, and there are many. We discourage that. That is not the law. The law is the driver and the maid are trying to cheat on you. You hand them over to the police, and they will continue from there. Okay. But I strongly believe by the end of today, we might come up with something to make sure we all live happily ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Abbas Imoro, for talking to us this morning. By now, I'm sure you viewer watching me, you know that you have to be paying a certain amount, and so if you feel cheated, you might as well hand over the driver who is trying to cheat you to the nearest police station. You're watching.